Maria Santos had always believed that bad things happened to other people. At 32, she was a nurse at City General Hospital, a mother of 2 young children, and someone who spent her days helping others heal from their worst moments. She never imagined she would become the patient fighting for her own life. The evening of March 15th started like any other. Maria finished her 12-hour shift at the hospital, her feet aching in her worn sneakers as she walked through the parking garage. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows between the concrete pillars. She was thinking about her children, Sophia and Miguel, who were staying with her mother while Maria worked the night shift. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she had promised to take them to the park. As she approached her small blue Honda, Maria heard footsteps echoing behind her. She glanced over her shoulder and saw a man in a dark hoodie walking about 20 feet behind her. Something about his movements made her uncomfortable. He seemed to be matching her pace, slowing when she slowed, speeding up when she did. Maria's nursing training had taught her to trust her instincts, and, right now, every instinct was telling her something was wrong. She fumbled for her keys, her hands suddenly shaky. The parking garage was eerily quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of traffic from the street above. Most of the other nurses had left hours ago, and the few remaining cars were scattered across the vast space like islands in a concrete ocean. "Excuse me, miss," a voice called out behind her. Maria froze, her key halfway to the lock. The voice was closer than she had expected, maybe 10 feet away. She turned around slowly, keeping her car between herself and the stranger. The man was young, probably in his early 20s, with hollow cheeks and nervous eyes that darted around the garage. His hands were shoved deep in his hoodie pockets, and he was shifting his weight from foot to foot like he was preparing to run or fight. "Can I help you?" Maria asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She had dealt with agitated patients before, people who were scared and unpredictable. The key was to stay calm and not make any sudden movements. "I need money," he said, his words coming out in a rush. "My girlfriend, she's sick, and I need money for her medicine. I know you work at the hospital. You must have cash." Maria's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to think clearly. She had maybe $40 in her wallet and her credit cards. Nothing worth risking her life over. "I don't carry much cash," she said gently, "but I can give you what I have. And if your girlfriend needs medical help, I can tell you about the free clinic downtown." For a moment, the young man's expression softened, and Maria thought she might be getting through to him. But then, his face hardened again, and she saw his right hand move inside his pocket. The shape it made against the fabric made her blood run cold. "Don't try to be a hero," he said, his voice now cold and flat. "Just give me your purse and your car keys." Maria slowly reached into her jacket for her purse, her mind racing. The parking garage had security cameras, but would anyone be watching at this hour? The security guard usually made his rounds on foot, but she hadn't seen him tonight. Her phone was in her purse, but even if she could reach it, there wouldn't be time to call for help. As she pulled out her purse, she tried to keep talking, hoping to de-escalate the situation. "What's your girlfriend's name? Maybe I know someone at the hospital who can help her." The question seemed to catch him off guard. His eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Elena," he said quietly. "Her name is Elena, and she's pregnant. She's been having pains, but we don't have insurance." Maria felt a surge of sympathy despite her fear. She had seen too many young couples in similar situations, desperate and scared, turning to dangerous choices because they felt they had no other options. "Listen," she said, "my name is Maria. I'm a nurse in the emergency department. If Elena needs help, bring her to the hospital. We can't turn away someone who needs emergency care." For a brief moment, she thought she was reaching him. His hand relaxed slightly in his pocket, and his shoulders dropped. But then, she heard the sound of a car engine echoing through the garage, and everything changed. The young man's head snapped toward the sound, panic flooding his features. A security patrol car was making its way through the garage, its headlights sweeping across the concrete pillars. Maria realized this was her chance, and started to wave toward the approaching vehicle. "No," the man shouted, and suddenly his hand was out of his pocket, and Maria found herself staring at the barrel of a small black pistol. "Don't move. Don't say anything." The security car was still several rows away, its engine growing louder as it approached. The young man was breathing heavily now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool night air. His hand was shaking as he held the gun, and Maria realized with growing horror that his fear made him even more dangerous. "Please," she whispered, "just take my purse and go. I won't tell anyone what you look like." But it was too late. The security car had turned down their row, its headlights now directly illuminating them. Maria could see the guard behind the wheel, an older man named Frank who she knew from their brief conversations during shift changes. He was reaching for his radio, probably to report the suspicious activity. The young man spun around, raising the gun toward the approaching vehicle. "Get back!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Stay away." Frank hit the brakes, his car skidding slightly on the smooth concrete. Through the windshield, Maria could see his eyes widen as he registered the weapon. His hand moved toward his own radio, probably calling for backup. That's when everything went wrong. The sound of sirens in the distance, still faint but growing louder, sent the young man into a complete panic. He spun back toward Maria, the gun wavering in his grip. "This is your fault," he shouted. "You made them come." "I didn't call anyone," Maria said, her hands raised, trying to project calm she didn't feel. "Just go. Take my car, take my money, whatever you need. But don't hurt anyone." The sirens were getting closer now, and Frank's security car was backing away slowly, the older guard speaking rapidly into his radio. The young man looked trapped, cornered between the approaching police and the security guard who had witnessed everything. In that moment, Maria saw something shift in his eyes. The desperate hope was gone, replaced by a cold resolve that terrified her more than his earlier panic. She had seen that look before in the emergency room, usually right before a patient gave up fighting for their life. "I'm sorry," he said, and she knew with horrible certainty what was about to happen. The first shot came without warning, the sound echoing through the concrete space like thunder. Maria felt a burning sensation in her shoulder and stumbled backward against her car. She looked down and saw blood spreading across her scrubs, dark against the pale blue fabric. The young man was still pointing the gun at her, his face a mask of desperate determination. "I can't go to jail," he said, more to himself than to her. "Elena needs me." Maria pressed her hand against her shoulder, feeling the warm wetness seeping between her fingers. Her medical training kicked in automatically, even as shock began to cloud her thinking. Shoulder wound, possibly arterial involvement, need to apply pressure and elevate if possible. "You don't have to do this," she gasped, fighting to stay conscious. "There are other ways. Let me help you find other ways." But the young man was beyond hearing her now. The sirens were very close, probably less than a minute away, and she could see Frank speaking urgently into his radio while keeping his car between himself and the gunman. The second shot hit her in the abdomen, and Maria doubled over, the pain unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had treated gunshot victims before, had seen the damage that bullets could do to human tissue, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of it happening to her own body. She slumped against her car door, her vision starting to blur around the edges. The young man was still standing there, the gun hanging loosely at his side now, staring at her with a mixture of horror and resignation. Behind him, she could see the flashing lights of police cars as they turned into the parking garage. "I'm sorry," he said again, and Maria realized with crystal clarity that he was about to finish what he had started. She thought of Sophia and Miguel, probably asleep in their grandmother's house, unaware that their mother might not be coming home. She thought of all the patients she had saved, all the families she had comforted, all the good she still wanted to do in the world. And in that moment, something hardened inside her. A determination born not of anger, but of love, love for her children and her life and her future. She was not ready to die. Not here, not like this, not when her children still needed her. As the young man raised the gun for what she was certain would be the final time, Maria made a choice that would define everything that followed. Instead of pleading or closing her eyes or waiting passively for death, she looked directly at him and spoke with a voice that was steady despite her pain. "My children need me," she said simply. "And Elena needs you alive, not in prison for murder." For just a moment, the gun wavered in his grip. And in that moment of hesitation, everything changed again. The police cars were in the garage now, their sirens screaming off the concrete walls, their spotlights turning the dim space into a harsh theater of black shadows and brilliant white light. The young man turned toward the approaching cars, raising his weapon toward the officers who were already emerging from their vehicles with their own guns drawn. Maria heard someone shouting through a megaphone, ordering him to drop his weapon and get on the ground. She knew what would happen next. She had seen enough police shootings in the emergency room to know how quickly these situations could escalate. In seconds, this parking garage would become a war zone, with her caught in the middle, bleeding and helpless. Using the last of her strength, she pushed herself away from her car and toward the concrete pillar a few feet away, hoping to get some cover before the shooting started. As she moved, she felt a wetness spreading down her leg and realized she was losing more blood than she had thought. The young man was shouting something at the police, but Maria couldn't make out the words over the sound of the sirens and her own labored breathing. She pressed herself against the cold concrete of the pillar, trying to stay conscious, trying to think clearly about what she needed to do to survive. She had to stop the bleeding. That was priority one. She pulled off her jacket and pressed it against the wound in her abdomen, gasping at the pain. The shoulder wound was bleeding too, but it felt less serious. She could move her arm, which meant the bone wasn't shattered and the major blood vessels were probably intact. The sound of gunfire erupted through the garage, and Maria instinctively curled into a ball behind the pillar. She couldn't tell who was shooting or how many shots were fired, but it went on for what felt like hours and was probably only seconds. When silence finally fell, broken only by the echo of sirens and shouting voices, Maria realized she was still alive. She was hurt, possibly badly hurt, but she was breathing and conscious and alive. The shooting had stopped, which meant either the police had taken control of the situation or the young man was no longer a threat. She heard footsteps approaching, heavy boots on concrete, and then a voice calling out, "Ma'am? Ma'am, are you okay? This is the police. We're here to help you." Maria tried to respond, but found her voice was barely a whisper. She waved her free hand, the one that wasn't pressed against her abdomen, hoping they would see her behind the pillar. A moment later, a police officer appeared around the concrete column, his weapon holstered, his hands empty and visible. He was young, probably not much older than the man who had shot her, with kind eyes that widened when he saw the blood. "Officer Martinez," he said, speaking into the radio on his shoulder. "I've got the victim. Female, conscious, multiple gunshot wounds. We need paramedics immediately." He knelt beside her, his training evident in the calm, professional way he began to assess her injuries. "Ma'am, my name is Officer Rodriguez. Can you tell me your name?" "Maria," she managed to whisper. "Maria Santos. I'm a nurse." "Okay, Maria, that's good. You're going to be okay. The paramedics are on their way, and we're going to take good care of you. Can you tell me where you're hurt?" Maria lifted the jacket slightly to show him the wound in her abdomen. "Shoulder too," she said. "Need to keep pressure on both." Officer Rodriguez nodded and immediately took over holding pressure on her abdomen while she maintained pressure on her shoulder. "You're doing great, Maria. You're doing everything right. Help is coming." In the distance, she could hear the sound of an ambulance siren, different in pitch from the police cars, growing steadily louder. She had heard that sound thousands of times from inside the hospital, usually as a signal that someone was about to need her help. Now she was the one who needed help, and the irony wasn't lost on her. "The man," she whispered to Officer Rodriguez. "Is he?" "He's in custody," the officer said, his voice carefully neutral. "You don't need to worry about him anymore. Just focus on staying with me, okay? Keep talking to me." Maria nodded weakly, grateful for his calm presence. She could feel herself getting weaker as the blood loss continued, despite their efforts to control the bleeding. Her vision was starting to tunnel, and she was feeling cold despite the warm spring night. "My children," she said urgently, suddenly, remembering. "Sophia and Miguel? They're with my mother. Someone needs to call my mother. We'll take care of that," Officer Rodriguez assured her. "What's your mother's number?" Maria recited the number, relieved to find that her mind was still clear enough to remember it. As she spoke, she could hear the ambulance getting closer, its siren now echoing through the parking garage. The paramedics arrived like a small army, their equipment and voices filling the space around her. Maria recognized the organized chaos of a medical response, the same efficiency she had witnessed countless times from the other side. They moved with practiced precision, establishing 4 lines, checking her vital signs, preparing her for transport. "Maria, I'm Tom, and this is Sarah," one of the paramedics said as they worked. "We're going to get you to the hospital. Can you tell us what happened?" As they lifted her onto the stretcher, Maria found herself looking up at the ceiling of the parking garage, noting absently that several of the fluorescent lights were flickering. She was going to live, she realized with a surge of gratitude that surprised her with its intensity. She was hurt, maybe badly hurt, but she was going to live. As the ambulance pulled away from the parking garage, its siren wailing in the night, Maria closed her eyes and thought about her children. Tomorrow was Saturday, and she had promised to take them to the park. It might be a while before she could keep that promise, but she would keep it eventually. She was not done yet. Not even close. The emergency room at City General Hospital looked different from this angle. Maria had walked through these doors thousands of times as a nurse, always focused on the patients who needed her care. Now she was the patient, staring up at the familiar ceiling tiles as the paramedics rushed her stretcher through the automatic doors. Dr. Jennifer Chun, the emergency department chief, was already waiting when they arrived. Maria had worked with Dr. Chen for 3 years, had seen her handle the most complex cases with steady hands and a calm voice. Now those same steady hands were examining Maria's wounds while firing rapid questions at the paramedics. 2 gunshot wounds, one to the left shoulder, one to the lower abdomen. Tom reported as they transferred Maria to the hospital bed. Blood pressure dropping, pulse increasing. She's lost a significant amount of blood, but remained conscious throughout transport. Dr. Chen's eyes met Maria's for just a moment, and Maria saw something flicker across her colleague's face. Recognition, concern, and a steely determination that made Maria feel safer than she had since the shooting began. "Maria, I need you to stay with me," Dr. Chen said, her voice professional but warm. "We're going to take good care of you. Can you tell me your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? 8, Maria managed to say, though it felt more like a 10. Her medical training told her to be accurate in her reporting, even when she was the patient. The trauma team moved around her with the same choreographed efficiency Maria had been part of countless times before. Blood samples were drawn, X-rays were ordered, for fluids were started. Maria found herself oddly comforted by the familiar routine, even from this side of it. "We need to get her to surgery," Dr. Chen announced after reviewing the initial scans. "The abdominal wound has damaged the small intestine, and there's internal bleeding. Sarah, call Dr. Williams and tell him we're coming up." As they prepared to move her to the operating room, Maria grabbed Dr. Chen's arm with her good hand. "My children," she whispered urgently. "Someone needs to call my mother. The kids are with her, and she doesn't know what happened." "Already taken care of," Dr. Chen assured her. "Officer Rodriguez called her, and she's on her way to the hospital. Your children are safe." The relief that flooded through Maria was almost overwhelming. Whatever happened to her, Sophia and Miguel would be okay. Her mother, Carmen, was a strong woman who had raised 5 children of her own. She would know what to do, how to protect them from the worst of this. The elevator ride to the surgical floor felt like it took forever, though Maria knew it was only a few minutes. She could feel her strength ebbing with each floor they passed, her body's resources depleted by blood loss and shock. The faces above her began to blur together, voices becoming distant and echo-like. Dr. Williams, the chief surgeon, appeared beside her stretcher as they reached the operating room. Maria had known him for years, had assisted with some of his cases when the emergency department was short-staffed. He was a brilliant surgeon, but, more importantly, he was a good man who cared deeply about every patient who came under his care. "Hello, Maria," he said, his voice gentle despite the urgency of the situation. "I'm going to take very good care of you. The anesthesiologist is going to put you to sleep now, and when you wake up, this will all be over." As the anesthetic began to take effect, Maria felt herself drifting away from the bright lights and concerned faces. Her last conscious thought was of her children, probably sleeping peacefully in their grandmother's house, unaware that their world had just changed forever. She dreamed of running through a dark forest, chasing something she couldn't see but knowing with absolute certainty that she had to catch it. Her legs felt heavy, like she was running through deep water, and no matter how hard she pushed herself, the thing she was chasing stayed just out of reach. Sometimes the forest would change into the hospital, but everything was wrong. The corridors stretched on endlessly, and the rooms were empty except for the sound of medical equipment beeping in the distance. She would call out for her patients, for her colleagues, but no one would answer. In one particularly vivid dream, she was back in the parking garage, but this time she was watching everything happen to someone else. She could see herself talking to the young man, could see the fear in both their faces, but she couldn't move or speak to warn them about what was coming. The dreams shifted and changed, sometimes peaceful, sometimes terrifying, but always with an underlying urgency, a sense that she was supposed to be somewhere else, doing something important that she couldn't quite remember. When Maria finally began to wake up, it was gradual, like swimming up from the bottom of a deep pool. The first thing she became aware of was the pain, different now from what she remembered, more controlled but still present. The second thing was the sound of voices nearby, familiar and comforting. The surgery went well, Dr. Williams was saying. We repaired the damage to the small intestine and stopped the internal bleeding. The shoulder wound was actually less serious than it initially appeared. The bullet missed all the major blood vessels and passed through the muscle tissue cleanly. When will she wake up? Another voice asked, and Maria realized with a flood of emotion that it was her mother. She should be coming around soon, Dr. Williams replied. The anesthesia is wearing off, and her vital signs are strong. She's a fighter. Maria tried to open her eyes, but they felt incredibly heavy. She made a small sound, something between a groan and a sigh, and immediately felt a warm hand take hers. Mija, her mother's voice was soft but urgent. Maria, are you awake? This time, Maria managed to force her eyes open. The room was dimly lit, probably to help her adjust gradually to consciousness. Her mother's face was the first thing she saw, lined with worry but bright with relief. Mama, Maria whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been removed. Carmen Santos had always been a strong woman, but Maria could see tears in her eyes as she leaned over the hospital bed. Thank God, she murmured. Thank God you're all right. Dr. Williams appeared on the other side of the bed, checking the monitors and examining Maria's surgical sites with gentle hands. Welcome back, he said with a smile. You've been sleeping for about 6 hours. How do you feel? Like I got shot, Maria said, and was surprised when her mother laughed. She still has her sense of humor, Carmen said, wiping her eyes. That's a good sign. As the fog of anesthesia continued to clear, Maria became more aware of her surroundings. She was in a private room in the surgical ward, surrounded by flowers and balloons that told her people had already heard about what happened. The windows showed dawn breaking over the city, painting the room in soft orange light. The children, she asked, though she was almost afraid to hear the answer. They're fine, Carmen assured her quickly. They're at home with your sister Rosa. I told them you had to work late at the hospital, and you'll see them soon. Maria felt a weight lift from her chest. Her children were safe, and they didn't have to know the details of what had happened, at least not yet. There would be time to figure out how to explain this to them later, when she was stronger and could help them understand. Dr. Williams finished his examination and updated her chart. The surgery was successful, he explained. We had to repair some damage to your small intestine where the bullet passed through, but there shouldn't be any long-term effects. The shoulder wound required some stitches, but the muscle damage was minimal. You're going to have some scars, but functionally, you should make a complete recovery. How long will I be here? Maria asked. As a nurse, she knew the general timeline for recovery from this type of surgery, but every case was different. Probably about a week, Dr. Williams said. We want to make sure there are no complications, and you'll need to regain your strength before we send you home. But, honestly, Maria, you're incredibly lucky. A few inches in either direction, and we might be having a very different conversation. The word lucky struck Maria as strange. She didn't feel lucky. She felt like someone who had been through a nightmare and was just beginning to wake up. But she supposed that compared to the alternative, maybe she was lucky after all. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Officer Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, looking somewhat uncertain. I hope I'm not disturbing you, he said. I just wanted to check on how you were doing. Please, come in, Maria said, remembering his kind presence during the worst moments of the night. I wanted to thank you. You probably saved my life. Officer Rodriguez looked uncomfortable with the praise. I just did my job. You're the one who stayed calm and did everything right. That took real courage. Have you heard anything about the man who shot me? Maria asked. She wasn't sure why she needed to know, but somehow it felt important. Officer Rodriguez glanced at Carmen, who nodded slightly. He's in custody, he said. His name is Marcus Rivera, and he's 23 years old. He was arrested without further incident after the shooting. His girlfriend, Elena, is receiving medical care for pregnancy complications. Social services is helping them navigate the system to get the support they need. Maria absorbed this information with mixed feelings. Part of her was angry at Marcus Rivera for what he had done to her, for the pain and fear he had caused her family. But another part of her felt sorry for him, remembering the desperation in his eyes, the way he had spoken about Elena needing him. He was scared, she said quietly. I think if the police hadn't arrived when they did, he might not have shot me at all. He was just scared. Officer Rodriguez nodded. Fear makes people do things they never thought they were capable of, both good and bad. Over the next few hours, more visitors came and went. Dr. Chin stopped by during her break, bringing updates from the emergency department and reassurances that Maria's position would be waiting for her when she was ready to return to work. Several of Maria's nursing colleagues came by with flowers and stories from their shifts, maintaining the easy camaraderie that had always been one of the best parts of working at City General. By afternoon, Maria was feeling strong enough to sit up in bed and eat some solid food. The pain was manageable with medication, and she found herself thinking more clearly about what had happened and what it meant for her future. Carmen had stepped out to make some phone calls, leaving Maria alone for the first time since the surgery. In the quiet of the hospital room, with only the soft beeping of monitors for company, Maria allowed herself to really think about how close she had come to dying. 2 bullets. If either one had been aimed just slightly differently, she might not have survived the first few minutes in the parking garage. If the paramedics had arrived even a few minutes later, she might have bled out before reaching the hospital. If Dr. Williams hadn't been available for emergency surgery, the internal bleeding might have been fatal. But she had survived. Not just survived, but, according to the doctors, she was going to make a full recovery. Her children still had their mother, her patients would still have their nurse, and she still had all the years ahead of her that she had been planning for. The thought should have been purely comforting, but Maria found herself grappling with something she hadn't expected, a profound sense of responsibility. She had been given a second chance at life, quite literally, and now she had to figure out what to do with it. Had she been living her life the way she really wanted to before the shooting? Had she been the mother, daughter, nurse, and person she wanted to be? The questions weren't easy to answer, and Maria realized that her recovery was going to involve more than just physical healing. As she was contemplating these thoughts, her phone rang. Carmen had brought it from home, and Maria was surprised to see an unfamiliar number on the display. Hello, she answered cautiously. Is this Maria Santos? The voice was young and female, nervous but determined. Yes, it is. Who is this? My name is Elena Rivera. I'm Marcus's girlfriend. I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear, but I needed to call you. I needed to tell you how sorry I am for what happened to you. Maria felt her breath catch. This was the pregnant girlfriend Marcus had mentioned, the reason he said he needed money so desperately. Elena, she said softly, how did you get my number? I called the hospital and explained who I was. One of the nurses gave me your room number, but I was too scared to come in person. I was afraid you would hate me. I don't hate you, Maria said, and realized as she spoke the words that they were true. What happened wasn't your fault. How are you feeling? Marcus mentioned you were having complications. Elena's voice broke slightly. The doctors say the baby is okay now. They gave me medication to stop the contractions, and they're going to help us apply for medical assistance. But Marcus, he's going to go to prison, isn't he? Maria closed her eyes, thinking about the scared young man in the parking garage, about the choices that had led him to point a gun at a stranger. I don't know, she said honestly. But, Elena, you need to focus on taking care of yourself and your baby. Whatever happens with Marcus, that baby is going to need you to be strong. I know, Elena whispered. I just wanted you to know that we're not bad people. Marcus isn't a bad person. He was just so scared about the baby, about not being able to take care of us. His father left when he was little, and he swore he would never do that to his own child. Maria felt tears prick her eyes, but whether they were tears of sadness or anger or something else entirely, she couldn't tell. Fear makes us do things we never thought we could do, she said, echoing Officer Rodriguez's words from earlier. I'm going to pray for you, Elena said. Every day, I'm going to pray that you get better and that you can forgive us someday. After Elena hung up, Maria stared at her phone for a long time, trying to process the conversation. She thought about Marcus Rivera, sitting in a jail cell, probably terrified about what his future held. She thought about Elena, alone and pregnant, dealing with both medical complications and the knowledge that the father of her child might go to prison for years. And she thought about her own children, safe at home with their aunt, blissfully unaware of how dramatically their lives could have changed in the space of a few minutes. Life was fragile, Maria realized. All of their lives, hers and Marcus's and Elena's and everyone else's, hanging by threads that could snap without warning. The difference between tragedy and survival was often just a matter of inches, or seconds, or pure chance. But sometimes, Maria thought as she settled back against her pillows, survival was also a matter of choice. She had chosen to stay calm in the parking garage, chosen to keep talking to Marcus even when she was afraid, chosen to seek cover and apply pressure to her wounds. Marcus had chosen to let fear override his judgment. Elena was choosing to focus on her baby's health despite everything else falling apart around her. Tomorrow, Maria would have to start making new choices about how to live this second chance she had been given. Tonight, though, she was simply grateful to be alive to make any choices at all. The sun was setting outside her window, painting the room in warm colors that reminded her of the lighting in the children's section of the hospital, where she sometimes volunteered during her off hours. Soon, Carmen would bring Sophia and Miguel to see her, and she would have to find the words to explain why Mama was in the hospital bed instead of beside it. But she would find the words, because that's what mothers do. They find ways to help their children understand the world, even when the world doesn't make sense to them either. And tomorrow, when she was stronger, she would start figuring out how to help herself understand it too. For now, though, she closed her eyes and listened to the familiar sounds of the hospital around her. The soft chiming of call bells, the distant conversations at the nurse's station, the quiet hum of life-saving equipment working around the clock. It was the soundtrack of healing, and for the first time since the shooting, Maria felt truly safe. Maria's children visited her for the first time 3 days after the surgery. Carmen had prepared them carefully, explaining that Mama had been hurt at work and needed to stay in the hospital for a while to get better. She had told them about the bandages and the machines without going into details about how their mother had been injured. Sophia, who was 8 and already showing signs of her mother's protective instincts, stood in the doorway for a long moment before approaching the bed. Miguel, only 5 and still young enough to accept most things at face value, rushed to his mother's side immediately. "Mama, does it hurt?" Miguel asked, his small hand hovering over the bandage on her shoulder as if he wanted to touch it, but was afraid he might cause more pain. "A little," Maria admitted. She had decided early on that she would always be honest with her children, within age-appropriate limits. "But the doctors gave me medicine that makes it hurt less, and every day it gets a little better." Sophia remained more cautious, her dark eyes taking in all the medical equipment with the serious attention of a child who was trying to understand something beyond her experience. "Are you going to die?" she asked suddenly, her voice small but direct. The question hit Maria harder than she had expected. "No, baby," she said, reaching out to take Sophia's hand. "I'm not going to die. The doctors fixed everything that was hurt, and I'm going to come home soon." "Promise?" Sophia asked, and Maria could hear the fear beneath the word. "I promise," Maria said, and felt the weight of that promise settle in her chest. She was going to keep it, no matter what it took. The children's visit was brief, but healing in ways that Maria hadn't anticipated. Their presence reminded her of all the reasons she had fought to survive, all the moments she still wanted to share with them. When they left, promising to come back the next day, Maria felt stronger than she had since the shooting. Dr. Williams continued to be pleased with her progress. The surgical sites were healing well, with no signs of infection. Her blood counts were improving daily, and she was able to walk short distances with minimal discomfort. Physically, her recovery was proceeding better than expected. Emotionally, however, Maria found herself struggling with issues she hadn't anticipated. She had trouble sleeping, often jerking awake from dreams about the parking garage or the sound of gunshots. Sudden noises in the hospital corridor would make her heart race. Even visits from well-meaning colleagues sometimes felt overwhelming. Dr. Chun, who had become more than just Maria's treating physician during her hospitalization, suggested that she might benefit from talking to someone about the psychological effects of the trauma. "It's completely normal," she explained during one of her daily visits. "What you experienced was life-threatening and terrifying. Your body and mind are still processing that, even though you're physically healing well." Maria was reluctant at first. As a nurse, she was used to being the caregiver, not the one receiving care. The idea of admitting that she was struggling mentally felt like a weakness she couldn't afford. But when she found herself crying for no apparent reason during a visit from a colleague, she realized that Dr. Chun might be right. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the hospital's trauma counselor, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a manner that put Maria immediately at ease. She had worked with countless victims of violence, and her approach was practical rather than theoretical. "The mind has its own timeline for healing," she explained during their first session. "Just like your body needed surgery to repair the physical damage, your mind needs time and attention to process what happened to you." Their conversations helped Maria understand that her reactions were normal responses to an abnormal situation. The hypervigilance, the sleep disruption, the sudden emotional outbursts, all were her mind's way of trying to protect her from future threats. "You survived something terrible," Dr. Reeves said. "Your brain is working overtime to make sure it never happens again. The problem is that this protective mechanism can interfere with your daily life if it doesn't have a chance to reset." Maria learned breathing techniques to help with the anxiety and strategies for managing the intrusive thoughts about the shooting. More importantly, she began to understand that seeking help for her emotional recovery was just as important as the medical treatment she had received for her physical injuries. On her 6th day in the hospital, Maria received an unexpected visitor. Elena Rivera appeared in her doorway, looking nervous but determined. She was noticeably pregnant now, her condition no longer hidden under loose clothing. "I hope it's okay that I came," Elena said hesitantly. "I called first, and the nurse said you were awake." Maria studied the young woman for a moment. Elena looked tired and scared, but there was a strength in her posture that reminded Maria of herself at that age, when she had been pregnant with Sophia and trying to figure out how to build a life for her child. "Please, come in," Maria said, gesturing to the chair beside her bed. Elena sat down carefully, her hands resting protectively over her belly. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said, "for not hating us, for understanding why Marcus did what he did. The prosecutor said that because you're not pushing for the maximum sentence, Marcus might be able to plea bargain for a reduced charge." Maria had indeed spoken to the district attorney about Marcus's case. She couldn't excuse what he had done, but she also couldn't ignore the desperation that had driven him to such an extreme choice. She had asked that his circumstances be taken into consideration during sentencing. "How far along are you now?" Maria asked, changing the subject to more positive ground. 7 months, Elena said, a smile briefly lighting up her face. "It's a girl. We're going to name her Hope." The name struck Maria as both heartbreaking and perfect. Hope was exactly what this young woman needed, what all of them needed to move forward from the events of that night. "Have you been able to get the prenatal care you need?" Maria asked, her nursing instincts taking over. Elena nodded. "The social worker at the clinic has been amazing. She helped me apply for medical assistance and connected me with a program for single mothers. I'm going to take classes to become a medical assistant while the baby is little." "That's wonderful," Maria said, and meant it. "It's a good field, and there's always demand for skilled medical assistants." They talked for nearly an hour, two women whose lives had become intertwined by a moment of violence, finding common ground in their shared hopes for the future. When Elena finally stood to leave, she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I know this might sound strange," she said, "but Would it be okay if I wrote to you sometimes? To let you know how the baby is doing, how we're managing. You're the only person who really understands what that night was like, what it meant for all of us." Maria considered the request carefully. Part of her wanted to put the entire experience behind her, to pretend it had never happened. But another part of her recognized that she and Elena were connected now, whether they chose to acknowledge it or not. Their lives had been changed by the same event, and perhaps staying in touch could help them both heal. "I'd like that," she said finally. "And Elena? If you ever need advice about anything medical, or if you just need someone to talk to who understands, you can call me." After Elena left, Maria found herself thinking about the strange ways that trauma could create connections between people. She would never have chosen to know Elena Rivera or her boyfriend, would never have imagined that a violent crime could lead to a relationship that felt like it might become a friendship. But then, again, she was learning that life rarely unfolded the way people expected it to. Dr. Williams discharged her the following morning, with strict instructions about wound care and follow-up appointments. The physical therapy team had worked with her to ensure she could manage basic activities at home, and Carmen had prepared the house for her return. The ride home felt surreal. The familiar neighborhoods looked exactly the same as they had a week ago, but Maria felt like a different person seeing them. She found herself scanning every parking lot, every group of pedestrians, every shadowy area where someone might be hiding. The hypervigilance that Dr. Reeves had warned her about was in full effect. Sophia and Miguel were waiting on the front porch when they arrived, barely containing their excitement about having their mother home. They had made welcome home signs with crayons and construction paper, decorated with flowers and hearts and stick figures of their family. "We made your favorite dinner," Sophia announced proudly. "Abuela helped us, but we did most of the work ourselves." The house smelled like the chicken enchiladas that had been Maria's comfort food since childhood. Carmen had clearly gone to great lengths to make everything as normal and welcoming as possible. Fresh flowers filled the living room, and Maria's favorite blanket was already laid out on the couch. But normal felt elusive. As much as Maria wanted to slip back into her regular routine, she found that simple activities required more energy than they used to. Standing in the kitchen for more than a few minutes left her tired. Climbing the stairs to her bedroom required concentration to avoid pulling at her surgical sites. More challenging was the emotional adjustment. The first night home, Maria lay in her own bed listening to every sound in the neighborhood. A car door slamming made her heart race. The wind rattling her bedroom window sounded like footsteps in the hallway. She got up multiple times to check the locks on the doors and windows, something she had never done before the shooting. Even with the security system armed and the porch light on, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was vulnerable, that danger could come from anywhere at any time. The children, sensitive to changes in their mother's behavior, began showing signs of stress themselves. Sophia became clingy, reluctant to go to school or leave Maria's side for any extended period. Miguel began having nightmares, waking up crying about monsters that were trying to hurt his family. Carmen, who had been staying at the house to help during Maria's recovery, found herself mediating between Maria's need for independence and her children's need for reassurance. It was a delicate balance, and there were days when everyone in the household felt the strain. "It's going to take time," Dr. Reeves reminded Maria during one of their phone sessions. "Healing from trauma isn't linear. You'll have good days and difficult days, and that's completely normal. The important thing is that you're taking care of yourself and getting the support you need." Maria's colleagues from the hospital were wonderful, taking turns to visit and bring meals, but their presence sometimes highlighted how much her world had changed. Their stories from work, which used to energize and interest her, now sometimes triggered anxiety about returning to the environment where the shooting had occurred. The hospital administration had been supportive, assuring Maria that her job would be waiting whenever she felt ready to return. They had even offered to allow her to transfer to a different department if working in the emergency room felt too challenging after what had happened. But Maria knew that running away from the emergency department wouldn't solve her problems. If anything, it would probably make them worse. She loved her work, loved the fast pace, and the feeling that she was making a difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments. She wasn't ready to give that up because of one traumatic night. 3 weeks after her discharge, Maria made the decision to visit the hospital. Not to work, just to walk through the departments and remind herself that it was still a place of healing, not danger. Carmen offered to come with her, but Maria felt this was something she needed to do alone. The parking garage was the hardest part. Maria had to park in the same structure where the shooting had occurred, had to walk past the spot where she had nearly died. Someone had cleaned away any physical evidence of what had happened, but Maria could see it all in her mind as clearly as if it had just occurred. She stood there for several minutes, breathing deeply and using the grounding techniques Dr. Reeves had taught her. Gradually, her heart rate slowed and her hands stopped shaking. The garage was just a garage again, not a place of terror. The emergency department welcomed her like a returning hero. Her colleagues had organized a small celebration, complete with cake and balloons. Dr. Chun gave her a tour of some changes that had been made during her absence, treating her like the valued team member she was rather than someone to be handled with kid gloves. "We miss you," Dr. Chin said simply. "The department isn't the same without your expertise and your calming presence. But we want you to come back only when you're truly ready, not a moment before." Maria spent an hour in the emergency department, observing the organized chaos she had always loved. She watched her colleagues caring for patients with the same skill and compassion she had always tried to bring to her work. Gradually, she began to remember why she had chosen this profession in the first place. On the drive home, she felt something shift inside her. The fear and anxiety were still there, would probably always be there to some degree, but they no longer felt overwhelming. She was beginning to see a path forward, a way to reclaim her life without pretending that the shooting had never happened. That evening, she sat down with Sophia and Miguel to have the conversation she had been putting off. It was time to tell them, in age-appropriate terms, what had really happened to her. "Remember how I told you that I was hurt at work?" she began, settling them beside her on the couch. "I want to explain a little more about what happened, because I think you're old enough to understand." She told them about the man who was scared about his girlfriend and their baby, about how he made a bad choice because he didn't know what else to do. She explained that sometimes people do dangerous things when they're afraid, and that's why it's important to ask for help before problems become too big to handle. "Was he a bad man?" Sophia asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I think he was a scared man who did a bad thing," Maria said carefully. "Those aren't always the same thing." Miguel curled up against her side. "Are you going to be okay forever now?" "I'm going to do everything I can to be okay," Maria promised. "And if I ever start feeling scared or sad about what happened, I have people who can help me feel better, just like you can always come to me when you're scared or sad." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Maria sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea and thought about the weeks ahead. She wasn't ready to return to work yet, but she could see that day approaching. She wasn't completely healed, either physically or emotionally, but she was healing. Tomorrow, she would call Elena to check on her pregnancy. Next week, she would start physical therapy to regain full strength in her shoulder. In a month, she would probably be ready to go back to the emergency department to resume the work that gave her life meaning. She had survived not just the shooting, but the aftermath. She had learned that healing was a choice that had to be made every day, sometimes every hour. She had discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed, and had found hope in the most unexpected places. Most importantly, she had learned that surviving something terrible didn't make her a victim. It made her a survivor, and that was a very different thing. 6 months after the shooting, Maria stood in the same parking garage where her life had nearly ended, but this time she wasn't alone. Elena Rivera walked beside her, pushing a stroller that contained baby Hope, now 3 months old, and sleeping peacefully despite the echoing footsteps and fluorescent lighting. "I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to come back here," Elena said quietly, looking around the concrete space. "But when you suggested meeting here, it felt important somehow." Maria nodded, understanding completely. They had both needed to reclaim this place, to prove to themselves that it no longer held power over them. "How does it feel?" "Different than I expected," Elena replied, adjusting the blanket around her daughter. "Smaller somehow. Less frightening." Maria knew what she meant. The parking garage that had loomed so large in her nightmares was just an ordinary space, no more dangerous than any other. The real danger had come from desperation and fear, forces that could strike anywhere, anytime. They walked to the spot where the shooting had occurred, marked now only by Maria's memory. Elena stopped and looked around, perhaps imagining how different all their lives might have been if Marcus had made different choices that night. "He writes to me sometimes," Elena said. "From prison. He asks about you, whether you're okay, whether you've been able to forgive him." Marcus Rivera had been sentenced to 8 years for aggravated assault and attempted robbery. The district attorney had agreed to reduce charges after Maria testified about his desperation and the circumstances that had led to his crime. He would be eligible for parole in 4 years if he maintained good behavior and completed the job training programs available in prison. "What do you tell him?" Maria asked. "That forgiveness is complicated," Elena said. "That you saved his life by speaking up for him at sentencing, but that doesn't erase what he did. That we're all just trying to move forward the best we can." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two women whose lives had been forever changed by one night of violence, now connected by bonds of understanding and mutual support that neither could have imagined 6 months ago. Baby Hope stirred in her stroller, making the soft sounds that meant she would wake soon. Elena looked down at her daughter with the expression of wonder that seemed to constantly surprise new mothers. "She's beautiful," Maria said, and meant it. Hope had Elena's dark hair and eyes, but there was something about her expression, even in sleep, that suggested a strength inherited from both parents. "The doctor says she's perfectly healthy," Elena said proudly. "All her developmental milestones are on track. And the WIC program has been amazing. I never would have known about all the resources available if it hadn't been for the social worker at the hospital." Elena had completed her medical assistant training while pregnant and had found a job at a community health clinic in a neighborhood not unlike the one where she had grown up. It didn't pay much, but it provided health insurance for both her and Hope, and it was work she found meaningful. "I love helping people navigate the system," Elena explained as they began walking toward the hospital entrance. "So many people don't know what services are available to them, or they're intimidated by all the paperwork and requirements. I remember how lost I felt before Marcus got arrested." Their friendship had developed slowly, built on shared understanding and mutual respect rather than the dramatic circumstances that had brought them together. Maria had provided guidance and encouragement during Elena's pregnancy and job search. Elena had offered a unique perspective on forgiveness and moving forward that had helped Maria in her own healing process. Today, they were meeting at the hospital because Elena wanted to see where Maria worked, and Maria was ready to show her. It had taken 6 months, but Maria had returned to her position in the emergency department 3 months ago. The transition hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Her first day back had been overwhelming. Every loud noise, every agitated patient, every emergency alarm had triggered her fight-or-flight response. By the end of her shift, she was exhausted and questioning whether she had returned too soon. But Dr. Chun and her colleagues had been patient and supportive. They had arranged for Maria to work day shifts initially, when the emergency department was generally calmer. They had paired her with experienced partners who understood her situation. Most importantly, they had treated her as a valued colleague rather than someone fragile who needed protection. Gradually, Maria had regained her confidence and skills. Her experience as a trauma survivor actually enhanced her ability to connect with patients who had been victims of violence. She could offer a perspective that went beyond medical care, helping people understand that survival was possible, that life could continue after trauma. The emergency department buzzed with its usual controlled chaos as Maria and Elena entered. Dr. Chin spotted them immediately and came over to meet Elena, whom she had heard about but never seen. "It's wonderful to finally meet you," Dr. Chun said warmly. "Maria talks about you and Hope often. How are you adjusting to motherhood?" "It's harder than I expected, but more rewarding too," Elena replied honestly. "I had no idea how much I could love someone I'd only known for 3 months." As they toured the emergency department, Elena watched Maria interact with patients and colleagues with obvious admiration. "You can see how much everyone respects her," she commented to Dr. Chun. "And the patients respond to her so well." "Maria has always been special," Dr. Chin agreed. "But since she's been back, there's something different about her approach to patient care. She has a depth of understanding that comes from having been where our trauma patients are." It makes her even more effective than she was before. They stopped by the trauma bay where Maria had been treated the night of the shooting. The room looked exactly the same, filled with state-of-the-art medical equipment ready to save the next person whose life hung in the balance. "This is where you worked on me," Maria told Elena, then turned to Dr. Chun. "I don't think I ever properly thanked you for everything you did that night." "You don't need to thank me, Dr. Chun replied. "But I will say that working on you was one of the most challenging cases of my career, not because of the medical complexity, but because you were one of us. It reminded all of us how quickly things can change, how precious life really is." Baby Hope chose that moment to wake up, her soft cries drawing attention from several of the nursing staff. Elena lifted her from the stroller, and Hope immediately settled in her mother's arms, looking around at the new environment with the bright-eyed curiosity of a healthy infant. "She's going to be smart like her mother," Maria observed, watching Hope track movement and respond to voices. "I hope she'll be brave like you," Elena replied. "When she's old enough to understand, I'm going to tell her about the woman who changed our lives by refusing to let fear and anger define her future." As their visit to the hospital wound down, Maria and Elena found themselves back in the parking garage, this time without the weight of difficult memories. They had transformed this space from a place of trauma into a symbol of resilience and growth. "I have something to tell you," Elena said as they reached Maria's car. "I've been accepted into the nursing program at the community college. It's a 2-year program, and it's going to be challenging with Hope, but I want to do what you do. I want to help people heal." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. "Elena, that's wonderful. You're going to make an excellent nurse. Do you have childcare arranged?" "My mother is going to help, and the college has a daycare center for students with children. The financial aid advisor says I qualify for grants and work-study programs. It's going to be tight financially, but I think we can manage. You know you can call me anytime if you need advice or support," Maria said. "Nursing school is demanding, but it's also one of the most rewarding things you'll ever do." As Elena buckled Hope into her car seat, she looked back at Maria one more time. "Can I ask you something? Do you ever regret not being angrier about what happened? People tell me I should hate Marcus for what he did to us, for putting our family in this situation." Maria considered the question carefully. It wasn't the first time someone had suggested that she should be more angry, more vengeful about the shooting. Some people seemed to think that forgiveness was a sign of weakness rather than strength. "I think anger would have hurt me more than it hurt him," Maria said finally. "Don't get me wrong. There are days when I'm furious about what happened, about how our lives were disrupted, about the trauma you and Hope had to endure because of his choices. But I refuse to let that anger poison my life or define my future." "How did you get there?" "To that kind of forgiveness." "I don't know if I'm there yet," Maria admitted. "Forgiveness isn't a destination, it's a journey. Every day I choose to focus on healing and growth rather than revenge and bitterness. Some days that choice is easier than others." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Marcus asks in his letters if he'll ever be able to make amends for what he did. I never know what to tell him. Tell him that the best amends he can make is to use his time in prison to become the man his daughter deserves as a father," Maria suggested. "Tell him to get his education, to learn job skills, to address whatever led him to make such desperate choices. And when he gets out, tell him to live a life that honors the second chance he's been given." They hugged goodbye, a gesture that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago, but now felt natural and necessary. As Elena drove away with Hope, Maria stood for a moment longer in the parking garage, reflecting on the journey that had brought them all to this point. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Sophia, who was now 9 and taking on more responsibilities at home. "Mom, Miguel, and I finished our homework and started dinner. Can we wait for you to eat?" Maria smiled, typing back, "On my way home now. Thank you for being such good helpers." Her children had been remarkable throughout her recovery. They had shown resilience and maturity beyond their years, adapting to their mother's changed needs without complaint. Sophia had become more protective and responsible, while Miguel had developed an empathy that impressed the adults around him. The drive home took her through neighborhoods she had known all her life, but Maria found herself seeing them with new eyes. Every block contained stories of struggle and survival, families doing their best to build good lives despite challenges that sometimes seemed overwhelming. At a red light, she noticed a young couple pushing a stroller, the woman visibly pregnant with their second child. They were laughing about something, completely absorbed in each other and their small family. 6 months ago, Maria might have looked at them and worried about all the things that could go wrong, all the dangers they might face. Now, she found herself hoping for their happiness, for their safety, for their dreams to come true. She had learned that focusing on potential tragedy was no way to live. Better to acknowledge that life was fragile while celebrating its beauty and possibilities. When she arrived home, the house was filled with the sounds and smells of family life. Miguel was setting the table with careful precision, while Sophia stirred something on the stove under Carmen's watchful supervision. Carmen had moved back to her own apartment 2 months ago, but she still came by several times a week to help and to maintain her close relationship with her grandchildren. "How was your day at work?" Sophia asked, in unconscious imitation of the way Maria used to ask about their school days. "It was good," Maria replied, hanging up her jacket and washing her hands. "I helped 3 families today, and all the patients I worked with are going to be okay." "How was school?" As they sat around the dinner table sharing stories from their day, Maria felt a deep contentment that had nothing to do with forgetting the trauma she had experienced and everything to do with choosing to focus on the life she was building in spite of it. After the children were in bed, Maria sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea and opened her laptop. She had been working on a blog post about trauma recovery, one of several she had written for a website that helped healthcare workers deal with workplace violence. The website had contacted her after hearing about her experience and her return to work. They wanted to share her story as an example of how people could recover from traumatic experiences and continue to find meaning in their careers. Maria had been hesitant at first, but she realized that her experience might help other people who were struggling with similar challenges. She finished the blog post and uploaded it, knowing that somewhere, someone who was dealing with the aftermath of violence might read it and find hope. That possibility made all the difficult work of healing feel worthwhile. Before closing the laptop, Maria checked her email and found a message from Elena with photos of Hope at her 3-month checkup. The baby was growing beautifully, alert and healthy, and surrounded by love despite the difficult circumstances of her first months of life. There was also an email from Dr. Reeves, checking in on her progress and reminding her that therapy was always available if she needed it. Maria had graduated from regular sessions to monthly check-ins, but she knew that support network was there if she ever needed it again. As she prepared for bed, Maria thought about the words that had become her mantra during the darkest days of her recovery. "I'm not done yet." She had whispered those words to herself in the hospital when the pain seemed overwhelming. She had repeated them during panic attacks and sleepless nights. She had said them out loud when people suggested she might want to change careers or move away from the city where the shooting had occurred. "I'm not done yet." Not done being a mother to Sophia and Miguel. Not done helping patients in their most vulnerable moments. Not done supporting Elena through nursing school and watching Hope grow up. Not done learning and growing and becoming the person this experience was shaping her to be. The shooting had changed her life irrevocably, but it had not ended it. She had survived not just the bullets, but the aftermath. She had chosen healing over bitterness, growth over stagnation, hope over despair. And tomorrow, she would wake up and make those choices again, because that's what survivors do. They keep going, keep growing, keep finding ways to transform their pain into purpose. In the quiet of her bedroom, with her children sleeping safely down the hall, and another day of meaningful work ahead of her, Maria Santos felt profoundly grateful to be alive. Not just alive in the sense of having survived, but alive in the truest sense of the word, engaged with life, committed to making a difference, open to all the possibilities that still lay ahead. She was, indeed, not done yet. Not even close.